to Alter Egos. I'm your host, Glenn, and with you this week on the podcast is a very special guest, lead card game designer, Caleb Grace. How's it going tonight, Caleb?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Glenn.
No worries. It's been a bit hard to line up a time in our time zones, but it's great to have you on the podcast. What's been your week so far?
Busy, just busy. I'm wrapping up a project. Of course, I can't say what it is, but it's been interesting trying to adjust to working from home, and especially toward the end of a project, trying to bring all the parts together. That the end of a project is when all the different departments have to combine efforts. So it's when we're really working closely with graphic design and art and our producers overseeing all of that. And it's a lot easier when we're all under one roof. I'll say that.
Is Fantasy Flight Games like a big proponent of Zoom? Like, you guys all on the Zoom calls, putting your hands up and stuff?
No, we're not using Zoom. We're using another app called Teams. So we do a lot of video conferencing. Mostly, though, we use more the chat feature. Just kind of throughout the day, just keeping that app open so anybody can chat you at any time. So it's a lot of back and forth. Trying to track down, like a missing art piece or double checking a rule or a card count or any number of things. We really do try to, pull it all together at the end as free of errors as possible.
Yeah, I know that at the hospitals we've been using Zoom, and there's been a lot of technical issues around that. But having a chat open all day sounds like a good solution for that.
Yeah, my kids are doing school on Zoom now, so I get to see a lot of that. Actually, it's interesting. Total aside, but a lot of people are doing school from home now, like my kids are, and every school kind of does it its own way too. So one kid uses Zoom and another uses Schoology, and of course that just means as parents we have to master all these different technologies.
Yeah, like we, at the end of the year we'll end up with diplomas of technology as part of our 2020 education.
Yeah, we all deserve stickers or something saying "I survived 2020."
Just put it on a bumper sticker or it's like a little badge in the years to come.
No, I want a graduation ceremony. Like I could have skipped my high school graduation, but I want to walk across the stage at the end of 2020 and get a medal or something.
Yeah, a bit too personal maybe, but the medical school isn't like having a graduation ceremony this year, and so we've been trying to work out what we're going to actually do, because we had like our class photo on Zoom, so like people like screenshotted us all. So it's a very different year for a lot of those sort of things.
Oh man, I can only imagine when it's trying to do med school through Zoom. Jeez.
Yeah, it was an interesting take, but I guess we're here for Marvel Champions and not the 2020 that you and I have been experiencing otherwise. I guess before we get started, sure. If you can recall some of these things, I was going to ask if you just some few questions about your experience with the game. I was going to start with, do you have a favorite player card that exists in the card pool at present? Is that an easy
favorite player card? Oh my gosh. I don't know if I actually have a standout favorite, but the first one that came to mind is shield toss, because I never get tired of seeing Captain America throw his shield and bounce it off multiple targets and catch it back in his hand. That I will read any comic where he does that, even if it's just kind of the same concept every time.
Did the Black Widow trailer excite you, where the shield gets tossed and Taskmaster grabs it?
Oh yeah. Well, that trailer excited me for so many reasons. I can't wait to see that movie.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask is, do you remember the last hero and villain combination that you played with Marvel Champions from the current card pool?
To be honest, it's been a long time since I have played Marvel Champions while I was not play testing Marvel Champions. I suppose I could talk about, play testing Rise of Red Skull now that it's out, because I absolutely played a lot of Captain America versus Red Skull, because, why wouldn't you? That was always fun.
You get to use the shield tosses quite handily in that scenario as well.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, his fearless determination, that zero costume that boosts his thwart value, comes in really handy too with all the side schemes coming up every turn. Like I really I didn't set out to design a scenario that Captain America would be really good at. It's that's not how I'm approaching it. Right? It was really about what would Red Skull do. Right? He's a schemer. He'd have all this stuff going on. So it was just kind of an added bonus that Cap felt really fun to play in that scenario, being able to thwart and ready and thwart again to clear that side scheme, or thwart to clear it and then do some damage to Red Skull. Just had a lot of fun playing those two together.
Yeah, I'm worried the theme police is going to come after me because I actually haven't played that combination yet. But I'm glad to know it's quite a fun one.
No, nobody should be telling you which characters to play in Marvel Champions. That's even from a comic viewpoint, like that's the fun of comics, right? Is the unexpected or surprising matchups. That's one thing I actually always loved as a comic book fan, is when a villain from another title, would show up in your favorite comic title. So like, if like an Avengers villain showed up in an X-Men book or something, it was just always fun to see him go, oh yeah, we've seen Cap fight Red Skull a bunch of times, but how are the X-Men going to handle Red Skull? What's he doing over here? What's that going to look like? So I think people should definitely embrace that part of the game that's baked into its DNA. Is like, oh, what does it look when Miss Marvel fights Red Skull? That would be exciting. I'd read that book.
Yeah, I guess to touch on the book part, you mentioned that is it correct that you wrote the story for the campaign books?
Yeah. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. I actually I was a little sad the way we're doing credits now is like the design and the story are just kind of baked together now. It's kind of assumed that they're one and the same. Like whereas like Lord of the Rings, I'd get a separate credit for writing because it was kind of came in later. Like designing Lord of the Rings used to mean just design, and then we added the story element later, and so it was kind of a separate credit. But I was proud of that. I mean, it's not like an earth-shattering story or anything, but it was a little something extra to hopefully raise the value of the box and generate a little more excitement going into each scenario. And so I was really happy to first of all that we were able to do that. That I pitched this idea. If something like surprisingly didn't no one really thought of it right away. In hindsight, it seems obvious, that it's a property based off a comic book. So of course we'll put a comic in the rules. But I think, everyone's just so busy just trying to, lay all the groundwork with graphic design and mechanics and such, that there isn't always a lot of time to stop and reflect. So I don't remember when the idea came to me exactly. I was probably just about to fall asleep at home or something, and just kind of subconsciously it creeps in. But when I mentioned it to the team, everybody got excited, and the idea got approved real quickly. So, art team did a fantastic job, like recruiting some really talented people to draw those, and they were really excited for. It meant more work for their team, but they were just so excited by the idea. They really threw their all into it and came up with some great stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad that it sounds like people are enjoying that.
Yeah, there's some pretty memorable panels, I thought, that are quite. It really did add to the experience of going through, because it's not just like flip to the next page to read the rule book. There's like, a lot of, dynamic colors and action going on, and you can kind of follow the story a bit stronger through those comics. And even if it's appealing to a slightly younger audience in some cases, it's great that that's part of the product. I felt.
I'm really genuinely happy to hear you say that, because that's all we're going for ultimately with those, was kind of a throwback to those really campy Marvel comics that I grew up on. Like, I have a very vivid memory that kind of inspired this take on writing the comics. Like when I was a kid and I went to the library down the street, and I found like a Marvel Secret Wars comic, and I didn't really know much about it. I kind of recognized the Hulk and Captain America, but I didn't really know much about them at this point. But it was great to read it, because if you've ever read that original Secret Wars storyline, it's deliberately campy, but it's so great for that reason. It's just a really, really fun, adventure, and it makes a lot of sense when you find out, in hindsight, that it was actually written to sell a toy line, because it kind of feels that way. And so I wanted to kind of capture that feeling that I had as a kid reading those books and just going, this is really fun. Like it's not too serious. We're just having a good time with some really interesting characters, and um, it seemed appropriate to have kind of that approach. Like if it was good enough to sell a toy line, it'll be good enough to get us from one scenario to the next.
Yeah, and is that something that kind of did that come after you'd already kind of worked out the scenario order and so on, or was the story a bit more tied into how you developed the overall product?
But we definitely had the scenario story outline before we even discussed a comic book. The coming up with the five adventures and kind of the connecting thread. That's actually part of like what we call our vision step. So every product begins with a vision document, and that document just outlines all the highlights of the product and what heroes are going to be in it, what is their hook in the game, and each villain and kind of what makes them different. So that was all in there already. And so when I say it was kind of like this added value thing, it was like we were already well into working on this product. And that's why when I came up with the idea, I didn't know for sure if that was something we were going to be able to do, partly just because of where we were already at in our development timeline. And that's why I really like to give credit to everyone who made it happen, because they kind of had to say, okay, it probably would have been better to know this going in, but let's make it happen now. So that's part of why it just like makes me smile so much to hear you bring that up is one of the first things you want to talk about with the box, and to know that it really did make an impression. And I've seen a couple other posts online, particularly with like parents who were talking about how exciting it was to read the comic with their kids. Like that really makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, I think it just buys more into what this game is about, because I've played all three LCGs, and so like Arkham, you strap yourself in for reading a bit of a novel before you start.
Mm-hmm.
But I really
Mm-hmm.
like that this one's more like I read a comic book and then I get to play a comic book like scenario. Like it all kind of
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it naturally fits in, like you said, in hindsight.
No, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad that worked out that way. Yeah, I look at what Matt does to write all those stories for Arkham. He does so much writing. Like you can tell he's a novelist, from the way he writes and all the alternate endings and everything. And I kind of looked at that and said, like, yeah, I can't do that. There was a time that Matt and I shared writing duties on Lord of the Rings, but he has left me far behind in that department now. I kind of had to go a different direction with Marvel and lean into the medium to kind of get away from that. Like he's raised the bar too high on the actual like short storytelling and the rules for me to. I don't want to follow him in that.
Just forge your own path ahead. Um, you mentioned kind of like the vision document and sort of the hero hooks and the villain hooks, and I was wondering, like, is that a process where you've been at home or in the office and you've been like, Crossbones, I want this sort of thing, and Red Skull, I want this sort of thing, and you kind of put it together, then present it, or is it a bit more rough than that, and then you kind of expand on it following approval of a project?
I think our vision process has actually matured and developed quite a bit since I first started at FFG, because kind of the last thing you said there might have been more accurate to the visions that I wrote when I first started, where it was basically the broad strokes and not a lot of detail. Writing a vision for something like the Lord of the Rings Ringmaker cycle would have been like, well, we're gonna explore Sauron's history with orcs and how he came up with a ring, and we're going to do scenarios with Dunlendines, and we're going to introduce this time mechanic where we're going to kind of challenge people to stop turtling and move faster in the game. And that would more or less be the vision. Just a lot of general ideas without a lot of detail. Like we might explain a little bit of how the time mechanic is going to work, but we're not going to necessarily describe in detail what every scenario is and what is its hook, and now it's actually much more thought out. Like anything that you got used to doing one way, it takes a little while to get used to doing another, but it's been good to get used to coming up with more fully formed ideas, having a clearer, more detailed roadmap. Because what you're really doing is you're just you're going to have to do this work anyway. So we're kind of shifting when we do it from later on to upfront, and that makes the later on that much easier. And it also it helps a lot of people to know what to expect, particularly partners. Our vision documents have this is something we didn't actually know until recently, but our vision documents actually get used to help communicate with our partners as well. So like Marvel is looking at these vision documents as well. So yeah, they have to be held to a higher standard now. So this is something we do at the office. Like this is not something I'm just cooking up at home and then I bring it to work. This is a huge important part of my job now. So usually that process will look like a discussion with me and Boggs for sure. We might invite other people to join us, but we'll talk about the set first. Talk about where we want to go. We'll probably actually talk to the people who are going to be reviewing the vision document later to get a good sense of what they're expecting to see in the vision document. That's going to be helpful if they know kind of which direction they want the game to go. That's definitely going to be helpful. So yeah, then once we kind of gathered all that information and kind of settled on a plan, then it's actually drafting it up and giving some thought to the details of every aspect, so we can include some of those details in the vision and be prepared to answer whatever questions might come up.
So is there sort of like a research like period where you're kind of delving deep into who the characters are and mechanically what they want, or are you more or is it more the other way where you go, we want a scenario that is high in damage and feels like a chase sequence, and like crossbones might fit really well here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's no one way to do it, and I think if you asked 5 different designers how they do it, you might get 5 different answers. For me, I think it's somewhere between the two, where I kind of know which characters that I want going in, and so I start thinking about how they're going to be different from each other mechanically, and then if I realize that 2 of them are just too similar, then I might need to swap out one for a different one to make sure that each scenario is distinct. So it's almost like you do one, then the other, and then back to the first one, then back to the other. So you're kind of first considering theme, the mechanics, then theme again, the mechanics again, and just kind of building it up and weaving it kind of tighter and tighter as you get further into it, until you have just that one cohesive idea.
I guess just to take a step back a bit, like was the idea of a campaign box something that you guys had wanted to deliver from the start? Because obviously there was the core set and then scenario packs and hero packs. What sort of drove the idea towards a campaign box for an additional product?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I don't know if that's come up. It's quite possible someone's asked me that. I totally forgot, so I'm sorry if I did. But I'm excited to answer that, because that is something that we thought of with the very, very beginning of our pitch for the game. That was Nate French, Michael Boggs, and myself sitting down together and talking not only about what we wanted the game to be, but after we kind of knew that, we also talked about how do we want to deliver it? What lessons can we learn from Lord of the Rings and Arkham, and how they present themselves, and also how they're distributed, and what can we learn from that and take over to Marvel and make better. And I love Lord of the Rings, and I think Matt's just killing it on Arkham. I think both those games are amazing, so it's not to take away anything from them, but we've definitely identified like a weakness in the release model, that both those games are sort of like, here's your deluxe box and here's your packs that follow. And of course, if you can't get the deluxe box, you can still buy the packs that follow, but you can't play the adventures in them. You can take the player cards right out and play with those, and that's great. So it's never like a dead purchase. But to get its full value, you have to have that deluxe box. And that means if someone didn't order enough, or they're out of print, or whatever, people are discouraged from buying the packs that come after until they can find the deluxe box. Or another thing we've noticed, and this is true, I think, for all of our LCGs, both co-op and competitive, is that the first pack in a cycle, if the cycle is 6 packs, that first pack will always way outsell the 6th one. That the sales just tend to drop off as the cycle goes on. It's just kind of a consumer habit. People start out really excited at the beginning. Everybody buys that first pack, and then some people maybe forget or move on, or for whatever reason they don't necessarily pick up the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, whatever. And so that can also could potentially create another choke point where stores might not order, or we might not reprint or something. If everything's tied together, if we're reprinting in a cycle and not individual packs, then we can get tripped up, waiting for the other packs to sell out. So someone might be wanting that first pack and they can't find it, and it might take a while because packs 5 and 6 haven't moved through yet. So we're looking at all these things and saying, how can we just eliminate all these problems? Like, what can we do so that this is a problem of the past and not a problem for Marvel Champions? So yeah, I think as a team we talked about it, and we were like, this is the game is about heroes, and it's also about accessibility. So why don't we embrace the idea of pre-made decks? That's something I've seen other games do, like particularly Magic the Gathering. I think they do a fantastic job of packaging their product, where I always see it at game stores where it's like, buy this packet, it comes with 2 pre-made decks, right? It's like one, blue versus red. And it comes with their legendary card right in the front so you can see it. And you know that if you buy that product, you and your friend can sit down and play right out of the box. And that's a pretty big draw. I think that's pretty exciting. You're eliminating a lot of barriers to entry by giving people ready-made decks. And so we were like, why don't we just give them ready-made heroes? People are going to be really excited to see Captain America or Thor or Doctor Strange or Black Widow. Like, why not just package them so if that's their jam, if that's their favorite character, they just pick it up off the shelf and play. So then it was sort of a question of, okay, if the packs just come with a hero, where do we get the scenarios? I was like, well, let's enhance the idea of a deluxe box. Like, let's go a little bit bigger, put all the adventures into one bigger box. And at that point, I think someone got excited about the idea of like, why don't we put a couple of heroes in there too? Like, let's really make it big, right? Let's give them everything they need to dive right in with adventures and heroes. And everybody really liked that. So yeah, that was part of our pitch, was here's the 3 main product types. Oh, and the fourth one is just the scenario pack. That was part of our vision too. It's just kind of that wild card. If we can release a scenario pack kind of anytime that's appropriate, like especially after the core, we wanted to make sure we got a couple new adventures out there right away with Green Goblin and Wrecking Crew. Yeah, so those are your 4 main product types, and those were all there from the beginning.
So despite the delays, I guess, this year due to a few different reasons, it feels like now that Rise of Red Skull has come out, it really has kind of solidified that 4-product SKU type. I don't know if you can comment on it at all, but have you noticed like a different trend in the sales? Like, have the hero packs been more universally accepted, as opposed to that first pack model that you're talking about?
I don't see the sales figures. I'm sure I could go dig for them somewhere, but that's not actually my day-to-day. So I don't really know. I don't really know how they're selling. Hopefully they're selling well. I get indications that they're doing okay. But that's as deep as my knowledge goes.
Yeah. Well, at least we know there's more hero packs and a campaign coming. So something's going well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't been told to stop, so that's good. Yeah, here's a little anecdote that I think I can share. I think it's okay to pull back the curtain a little bit here, like on the issue of sales. Like, yeah, I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know how exciting or not those numbers might be, but I do know that when Steve Horvath from Asmodee was going out, he's the head of the publishing side of Asmodee. When he was getting ready to go out to Marvel to meet with them, he passed a message along to our team to say that he just wanted to say, like, kind of job well done on Marvel, that he's getting ready to go out on this meeting, and he knew it was going to go better because of how well Champions was doing. So I thought that was cool. That was good to hear. Yeah. That was kind of the closest I got to how's the game doing. It was like, well, Marvel's happy and Steve is happy. So these are good things.
In medicine, we call that the thumbs up from afar. So
there you go.
That's good. Yeah. So I guess I guess to focus back in on the Rise of Red Skull box that you've designed.
Hmm.
I wonder if you just wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign cards that you did introduce. I guess the anecdote that I have for that is my play group started playing with those one-off cards that you introduced as a reward from Crossbones, and we talked about how at the end of the campaign, we talked about how the choice whether or not to use that card in each scenario really kind of changed how we played each scenario, because we wanted to save it for Red Skull if we could, and we talked about how even just the thought process that we had throughout the campaign changed because of that one decision. And I wonder what you thought about the different levers that you have to pull, and just a little bit about those campaign cards that you threw in there.
Yeah, so I'm really glad to hear people enjoy those. In a way, I feel like I cheated a little bit with this campaign. We were kind of still at a point where we were trying we were still not quite settled into a comfortable routine yet with the development schedule. So the campaign stuff that you see in this box was kind of done toward the end. The scenarios, I'm really happy with the amount of attention development that the scenarios got, but the campaign was sort of like, okay, we're kind of running out of time, and naturally the campaign is the last thing we do because you want it to fit with all the scenarios. So if you haven't got all the scenarios designed, you can't really develop a thoughtful campaign. And so it was like getting all the scenarios done took us pretty close to the end. So then it was like, all right, really got to shift gears and focus in on this campaign and come up with something, that'll be really, evocative and interesting and fun. But I didn't feel like I had, a whole lot of time to explore and iterate. It was more like I need to come up with something that I know is going to work. So I say I kind of cheated because I think Lord of the Rings players will recognize some of the ideas in these campaign cards. They're very akin to some Lord of the Rings content, where in the saga campaign for Lord of the Rings, you have different kinds of boons that you can earn at different stages, and the first ones that you earn are really like basic upgrades to, like, this hero gets +1 attack and this hero gets +1 defense. And so you see that here with the double-sided basic upgrades, right? Like literally titled basic attack upgrade. And then the idea of those once per campaign cards, that was also in the saga campaign with when in the Lord of the Rings saga campaign, when you leave Lorien, Galadriel in the books, she gives gifts to the Fellowship, and those gifts were represented as these really powerful boons, but they could only be used once per campaign. And so, yeah, just because of the sort of the time constraints and really wanting to make sure that what we did worked, I kind of leaned into that experience, and so you can kind of see the comparison with the tech upgrades being these one-off upgrades, and the basic upgrades providing that basic stat boost and being more permanent. But I guess we probably have a lot of players in Marvel who have probably never played the Lord of the Rings saga campaign, so I guess it's all new to a lot of people, and that's cool too.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thankful that there's nothing like poison councils, for instance, showing up in the campaign. But I'm glad
that's true. There's some really vicious burdens in the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, we didn't go quite that bad. Although you can get some pretty nasty obligation cards if you're playing the expert campaign.
Yeah, I was going to ask you just a little bit about that card type. Like, have you enjoyed kind of fleshing that out a little bit, both, here in the campaign and then with the Kang pack coming up?
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting card type. I think we added that bit of rules in the Red Skull pack to kind of clarify, that obligations are not treacheries, that they don't just have an effect and go away. But we can kind of make them whatever we want them to be, to do whatever we need them to do. And I really like the idea that these things are very very personal to the identity. That no one else's alter ego is coming and dealing with this thing for me. This is something, this is something I have to do myself.
just letting everyone know that you're stuck in the, what is it, the surveillance one? Isn't there there's like a high security one and a few other. I like the art on them. I thought that was a positive as well.
Yeah, I had fun writing the art briefs for those. I think the art on Medical Emergency was some pickup art that we found with Doctor Strange clutching his chest. But the Zola's algorithm one in particular was this art brief I was excited to write, because you write so many of these in rapid succession, and sometimes you just get stuck on like, how do I represent this idea? And I was like, big fan of the Matrix. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to see like the kind of the green computer scroll coming down across a black screen, but in the spaces in between, it forms the Hydra banner. So I'm really happy with how that one turned out. I thought that was a kind of a cool concept.
Yeah, that's definitely like the vibe I got.
In truth,
from it.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I feel in truth though, the martial law and anti-hero propaganda ones are probably better for telling the story, because that was really something that I was excited about with this box, was just the idea of Red Skull using the Reality Stone to kind of turn America upside down and kind of rewrite history to where now Hydra rules the East Coast, or maybe all of America, and heroes are wanted, and they've got martial law and checkpoints and everything set up all around. So that was fun. I felt like a lot of the story came across in that art.
Yeah, it's interesting that the story can be told in so many different ways in a card game, and I feel like it definitely came across in all those different ways. I had a few broad questions about the scenarios designed in this box, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
I noticed that quite a few of the decks felt like a little bit thicker. So like Crossbones, I think he has about 40 cards in his deck, and then you get to, I think Taskmaster is quite large as well. But I wondered whether part of it is that sort of like for Crossbones, for instance, he's got 3 modular sets and he's got like some discard mechanics. Like, is that part of why sometimes the deck, because like I guess what I'm trying to get is that in solo, the variance is quite a lot higher when you have such a large deck. But in multiplayer, the experience is a lot more consistent in a way. And I tried it both ways, because I played it solo and it was a little bit variable. I had a lot of fun with it. But then I played multiplayer and I really felt like everything was firing on like full cylinders. Like, do you find that challenging with the deck size and sort of introducing discard mechanics to accelerate the deck?
Yeah, I don't know if I find that particularly challenging about Marvel. Well, actually, I said that backwards. I'm not sure I find that challenge about Marvel in particular. Like, just coming to the game from Lord of the Rings, that was a lesson that we had already learned about developing these co-op games that scale from 1 to 4 players, is that ultimately the experience is going to be different. It just is. And once you just kind of accept that and get used to it, then you just kind of focus in on making sure that the experience is good at each of those counts, right? So that it's not like playing it 1 player has to feel the same as playing it 4 player. I don't think that there's any reason that they should. You just want to make sure that playing it 1 player is a lot of fun, and playing it 4 player is a lot of fun. So as far as like getting the exact card counts, there's no real science there. It's well, I mean, maybe there is, but we tend to focus more on, does it feel right? I think between Boggs and I, we kind of both agree that, somewhere around 35 cards tends to be the ideal deck size, not specifically 35, but somewhere in that ballpark. And just, yeah, depending on the villain's design and what they're about, it might be appropriate to go smaller or bigger. I would need a really compelling reason to go less than 30 cards, because I find that at less than 30, especially in a 4-player game, you're just burning through that deck so quickly. I would, also need a compelling reason to go much higher than 40. Anything that comes around 35 seems to just kind of work.
The thing about Crossbones that I found really interesting was that the way the machine gun functioned in solo play was so different to how it worked in multiplayer, and that was a positive, because you kind of had to tailor your game plan depending on which way you played. Because like 2 ammo triggers is like you can kind of account for that. But in multiplayer,
Sure.
when there's like 8 ammo tokens, if you draw the assault and then the turn after you draw like another one, like he can just start going quite hard at one particular player, which I thought was interesting.
That was a favorite moment of mine in playtesting was playing the game with Jeremy Swern, and he what you just described is exactly what happened to him. He almost got KO'd after Crossbones like attacked him like a couple turns in a row, and he also had some particularly bad flips as he was flipping over those cards, and the high boost cards were being discarded, so he was just taking a ton of damage. And just every once in a while, I like to see him grimace. Just he likes to talk a lot of crap about my cards. I think it's all in good fun, but it's also good fun to watch his hero get lit up.
I guess full auto is a good card for that. I've definitely been hit for like 7 or 8 a few times with that card.
Yep, that's a mean one. Yeah, I like Crossbones as a character. I didn't know anything about him as a kid. I had this like Marvel card collection, like almost like baseball cards. It was like a trading card collection. So I had Crossbones card, and I remember looking at him, and my first impression was like, this guy's kind of silly. Like his name is Crossbones, and he has crossbones across his chest. Like it's just a little too on the nose. But actually, reading the comics, like he's a really interesting character, And so I had a lot of fun kind of designing him, and I just love the idea of like the machine guns and the full auto. It just felt so appropriate to him. Like I think his flavor text is like one of my favorites. Yeah, like where he's like, I consider myself a craftsman. I specialize in destruction and terror. Like, no, that wasn't it. It was the one on his third one. Those superpowered types might have more strength, but none of them have my style. Like he just loves what he does,
Yeah, the other interesting thing that my friend noticed was that there's like a card called Raid the Armory, which discards cards until a weapon gets discarded.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were trying different modular sets with him, and if you don't include the Weapon Master set, he doesn't have a weapon in the deck. So we got an acceleration token the first turn, and we were like, okay, he obviously didn't have a stocked armory at this time. That's okay. Maybe next time.
Now I'm curious. I'm like, what other weapons are there? And I want to know like the pumpkin bombs and stuff. Yeah, those are weapons. That would be kind of fun to throw in the. Is it the Goblin gimmicks? No, mutagen formula.
Yeah, Goblin gimmicks. That's correct.
Yeah, I would like to see someone put the Goblin gimmicks into his set and give Crossbones a glider and some pumpkin bombs. Oh, the glider's a vehicle, not a weapon. Oh man.
No, but it's it is funny to think similar to Rhino on a goblin glider. There's something tantalizing about that image.
Yeah, we all laughed about that. That was something that came up in development when Boggs was saying, "Yeah, I want to make this Goblin gimmick set, and it's going to have the glider and the pumpkin bombs." And I was like, "That's going to be interesting." Yeah, giant rhinoceros themed villain riding the Goblin's glider. For some reason, Rhino's always the first person we laugh about when we talk about hilarious interactions with modular sets.
Because he's breaking and taking things. So.
That's right. That is the most Nate French the flavor text in the game. It's beautiful. It makes me laugh every time because Nate just has this like just completely pure, almost childish joy about those kinds of jokes. Like it's just the happiness on his face is so genuine that he eventually just wins you over, and you're like, fine, whatever. We'll leave that text because like I can't break your heart and tell you Santa isn't real. Like I have to let you have this flavor text. Yeah, it really like everybody loves that flavor.
Yeah, I guess the other thing with Crossbone, just speaking of sort of like the initial orientation to a box similar to Rhino, do you find that there's some considerations you have to make for sort of introducing people to the first scenario in a box? Like, is there some design considerations you have to make there, or do you just make a really strong scenario?
I think as a design team, it's kind of always on our mind, the first scenario in the box that that almost everybody, when they open a box and start to play, they're going to start with scenario one. There's always a chance someone says, I just want to fight Red Skull first, and they skip the first four and go straight to him. But I think your average gamer is going to want to play him in order. And so yeah, it's definitely on our mind that like the first one should not be the most difficult in the box. I think everyone just kind of agrees on that. It shouldn't be the hardest one. It shouldn't be the most complicated one. It is kind of like your introduction to the box. It doesn't necessarily have to be the easiest one, but I think oftentimes it may just end up being that way. But then again, so often what we think is easy turns out to be hard, and what we thought was hard, people tell us is easy. So it seems we can never quite gauge that exactly. We weren't setting out to make Crossbones overly complicated or anything. We felt like his thing is just having weapons was not only appropriate for his character, but also for a first scenario to be like, oh, okay, this is what makes this scenario different, is that the villain is getting real powered up from these weapons. And so I want to make sure that I'm disarming him when I can to avoid those penalties.
Yeah, the experimental weapon kind of adds a lot to both like that particular scenario, and then obviously it carries through to the campaign as well. There's been a lot of online discussion about whether or not it's a modular set. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on whether or not it actually is something I can add into my experience elsewhere in Marvel Champions.
Sure. Yeah. I have been so busy recently. I feel real bad. I've gotten some great like rules questions and questions like that in my email recently. So to anyone who's listening and wondering where their answer is, I do sincerely apologize. I have been swarmed with trying to hit deadlines and wrap this stuff up. I intend to get to those, but I can answer this one for anyone who's listening. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, I mean it looks like a modular set to me. Experimental weapons, 1 through 4. Stuff that's campaign specific is labeled, somewhere with campaign. So like if you look at the obligations, they say expert campaign set. So maybe it's just because of how they're presented, in the rules as being mandatory for the Crossbone scenario and also being used throughout the campaign. But there's nothing that labels them as a campaign set. So yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't take these and just throw them into any scenario that you want.
Yeah,
I think that'd be a lot of fun. I want to see Rhino with a laser rifle.
I thought about in campaign play, I'll have the experimental weapon that like gets shuffled in from my campaign play, and then I'll load them up with another stack of experimental weapons from the modular. Was my idea. Just
sure.
Really,
yeah. I guess I would say, yeah, if you're playing the campaign, if you're playing the actual Hydra campaign, then it probably doesn't work to count that as a modular set there, just because like you pointed out, it's not a full modular set at that point, right?
Yeah, that's okay. I think that was just
I don't know, play whatever way you want, I guess. Yeah. I think that really is, at the heart of our design is we kind of have a recommended settings, recommended difficulty, really emphasis on recommended. Then that's just to say this is what we've play tested the most. This is what we're confident will deliver the experience that we're crafting. But that's not to say that's the only experience we want players to have. The whole point of modular sets and modular difficulty is so that people can play it the way they want. And in that sense, it's like if somebody just wants to grab these tech upgrades and play them outside of the Hydra box, if someone says, I just really want to bring this laser cannon to fight Ultron, I'm not going to come to your house and stop you. Like if that sounds like fun, go for it. I think the only time, the only time that it actually matters to play by, I think, official rules, like the only time it truly matters is if you're going to like, an event like Gen Con or something, and you're meeting up with other people, at which point, if you're playing with strangers, then you kind of need to play by the rules. So, you're all playing the same game. But if it's just you and your friends at the kitchen table, do whatever you want, right? Do whatever makes it fun for you. Just don't ask me crazy rules questions about your your made up house rules. I can't fix those for you.
Yeah, I guess the last thing on Crossbones was that you've allowed for 3 modular sets to kind of be included in his deck. Did you find any really interesting combinations in playtest that you thought were interesting, or like what was the decision behind like 3 rather?
Oh, I'm gonna confess that I do little to no modular playtesting. Like we're crafting that experience of what you see listed on the card is what we are testing. So as far as like what else goes good with it, like are we taking the under attack set out of Ultron and putting it into Crossbones? Like no, we're not actually play testing that. Largely just because we don't have time. Like that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun, but there's just not time in our schedule to start playtesting every different modular variation. Like we really leave that to the players to explore for themselves and find what they like or don't like, because there's really no right or wrong there. We really have to focus in on the one particular experience we're trying to craft here and how it fits into the campaign that we're making.
Yeah, and I think like the one thing I did like about that is that there's enough Hydra sets now that you can make like a full like a Hydra theme, at least for Crossbones.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like some really easy ones to kind of plug and play, which is great.
I'm looking at it's I understand there was a mix up about whether it's Hydra Patrol or Hydra Assault, and that's one of those little things that's gonna like frustrate me forever, because I don't know how they ended up being different on the card to the rules. That drives me crazy. I'm sure at one point we were probably playtesting that way, or actually probably what happened is those 2 sets probably were one set at one point. It was probably just called Hydra Patrol all in one, and then we probably cut that set into 2 and said, hey, this is like a gigantic modular set. Why don't we split it up and make 2 sets? And then we make the change in the rules and we forgot we didn't change it on the card. It's amazing how easy it is for stuff like that to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
Legions of Hydra, though, that's the one from the core.
How was it designing some sets that kind of did have the recommended modulars from the core set? Like, did you feel that was a additional way to kind of tie it back to the core experience, or that perhaps like what was the reasoning, I guess, a little bit behind that?
Yeah, I was really excited actually to do that. So kind of going back to when we were talking about the vision and everything, and knowing the story ahead of time, one of the first things we had to ask ourselves is, how does the story advance if Crossbones is trying to steal this Infinity Stone and we stop him? If we stop him, how does the story advance, right? Like, we knew from the beginning that Marvel was not going to be like Arkham, where you can sort of fail forward. You can kind of lose the scenario but keep advancing through the story, because we don't have the room to write multiple comic book endings, right? The comic book is going to be very linear. It's going to be start to finish. And so this is not an RPG LCG the way that Arkham is. This is a action adventure, quick exciting fight with the villain, right? So we're just going to assume that you've won and move on with our story. And so to do that, we have to figure out, okay, if we won, that means we beat Crossbones. And if we beat Crossbones, how did Hydra get away with the stone? And we're like, well, wouldn't it be cool if it would be very Brock Rumlow of him to say, I was just here to distract you. Really, Madam Hydra got in there and took it, and she's getting away now. And that was really exciting to us. And I just love the idea that, like, oh my gosh, we already put that set into the core. It's right there. We have Madam Hydra right there. And so to me, it was kind of this win-win moment of having her in there helps to tell the story, and it helps to connect it back to the core. And it's also a modular set that I don't have to create for this box, which gives me more room to add more campaign elements. Because that's something that I read a lot in the comments. It's like, oh, I wish they had added this. I wish they had added that. And we really do feel those constraints. Like 265 cards goes quickly. We're always pushing up against that. And so being able to pull in even a 6-card encounter set from the core means we just freed up 6 cards in the box. And that's huge. That's a real boon to us. that's a whole set of experimental weapons, or a whole set of one-off campaign upgrades. That being able to use that core set, um, modular set, allowed us to do.
Yeah, it's funny because you solved the problem that I, as a player, I hadn't really thought of with the narrative wise, but it really ties the two together in a really strong way, I felt.
Good. Yeah, that for me was just the added bonus, right? Like it did those two things simultaneously, freeing up some space and strengthening the story. And I like the way the set works within there too, because you have the extra Hydra minions, and how you get enough Hydra minions in there, they really do start to complement each other, especially with Hail Hydra and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to also maybe it's a bit more noticeable in 4-player where you might draw these elements a bit more consistently and like that narrative comes through. Yeah, it's definitely a ton of fun. I guess I just want to switch gears a little bit and jump to Taskmaster, if that's okay, and just ask you a little bit about
Sure.
what it was like to design like his theme of both. I felt like he had two themes. He had like the ally rescue mechanic going on, and then he also had like his, what he does with his reflective abilities and the treachery that like, discards cards off your deck and then attacks. How did you find approaching Taskmaster as a scenario?
Well, when we start designing a scenario, around a villain, it definitely starts with what is the villain's power set, and how are we going to represent that in the game. And Taskmaster is one of these really popular characters who's very strongly associated with Hydra in the comics. We definitely wanted to include him. Um, but his power is, I think, kind of unique and difficult to bring into a game, right? That his power is to learn any, kind of martial arts move, any kind of attack style that he sees. He's able to memorize it instantly and repeat it. So he can go toe to toe with Captain America. He's learned all of Captain America's moves. He can use his shield like Captain America, and um, but you're like, how do you represent that exactly? Like, we toyed with some pretty crazy ideas, like, well, maybe if I attack him, he attacks me right back. But those attacks, those attacks are not scaled evenly from heroes to villains, right? Like, speaking of Cap, like if it was like, say, his heroic strike, and it does 6 damage to the villain and stuns them, that's a significant hit to a villain. But most of these villains, their hit points, are much higher than Captain America's. So if Taskmaster could just turn around and hit you right back for 6 in a stun, like, you're more than half dead and you're stunned. So it was like, well, we can't get too literal with this. We're gonna have to find a way that feels like it represents his power without just being totally busted within the framework of our game. So that's kind of where we got we got some of these cards, like the photographic reflexes, right? Where it's a little more fair because you can see it there and you can kind of plan for it. Or mimicry was one that I was really trying to get that idea, right? Mimicry really is kind of the name for his power, and I really wanted to represent that idea of like, he's going to do whatever you're doing. And so just milling to see if he hits a thwart card and then he schemes, or milling to see if he hits an attack card and then he attacks, kind of like, I saw what you were going to do and I kind of beat you to it. Yeah, that was one that I'm actually really happy to kind of see the positive feedback we've gotten to Taskmaster, because if I'm honest, like, I was a little nervous about that one, just because it was such a challenge. Like, where someone like Red Skull, I felt very confident. Like, Red Skull's a schemer. That's easy to represent. Give him a lot of schemes. That's not too abstract for us to put in the game. But someone like Taskmaster, it was a little more challenging, I thought. So that's kind of how I approached his character. Then you were talking about like the heroes, the allies that you rescue. That was actually originally a campaign feature. It was like, he had his story on his card of how he's going, door to door and looking for heroes and trying to arrest them. And that was really meant to be represented through that forced response on the scheme itself, where, every turn you stay in hero form, you're taking damage because you're basically on the run from these forces that are hunting you down. So it wasn't necessarily married to the rescuing allies part. That was originally like, okay, in the campaign, then you shuffle in these things, and now you now we're taking it to the next level in the campaign, and you rescue these characters. But the feedback I got was that people loved rescuing those allies so much that they just wanted it to be a part of the scenario all the time. And I didn't really see a reason why it couldn't be, because it still works the same in campaign mode. But now it just makes Taskmaster that much more fun to play. That's pretty much how they both kind of ended up there together.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever say that Master Plan was going to be my best friend in a scenario, but I really wanted to have the deck search for a side scheme so they can rescue my allies. It's definitely fun. Did you have fun picking the 4 allies? Like, I know Moon Knight has been a much demanded character to be seen in the game.
Yeah. Actually, I had a lot of fun with that, because it was sort of like, well, we have this unique opportunity to include some kind of street level heroes. Is kind of how they're referred to in the comics. You know, if they don't fly or breathe in outer space or go on interplanetary missions, then they're kind of called street level, right? They kind of patrol their neighborhood, or, you know, they kind of fight gangsters and stuff. And so far, you know, we've mostly been dealing with Avengers, and then, you know, we've announced Guardians. And so, you know, it's like, these are really popular characters that we'd like to include in the game, but they're not really fitting into our release schedule yet. So here's an opportunity to just kind of acknowledge them and say, hey, there's these cool characters too. And, you know, I think the story is taking place, you know, in New York. So it kind of made sense to grab heroes that we know operate around New York. And also heroes that you could imagine, if Hydra got the drop on them, if Taskmaster was there, like, they could probably bring these guys in, you know. Like, we weren't going to have, like, oh my gosh, Taskmaster and Hydra just kind of captured the Hulk, you know, like that might have been a little harder to swallow. Or they got the drop on Thor. Like, they probably could contrive a reason to do that, but it's just a little bit, to me, it enhanced the story more to be like, oh my gosh, they took over New York, and, you know, Moon Knight was there, and so was White Tiger, and now we got to help them out.
Yeah, it certainly is a really fun mechanic, and I like that idea of, like, it fits more in a narrative sense. I hadn't really thought about that, but I definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it. Good. Yeah, I have noticed this whole time. I get so excited to respond. I keep talking over you, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude.
We can just blame the delay between countries. It's fine.
The non-existent delay. No, that's my bad. I was just looking at them online here, and I see they all have the hero for hire trait. That I almost forgot about that. That was also part of the theme, right? It was like, all these street level heroes that occasionally work together as part of the heroes for hire. So I thought that was kind of cool too, that they were all linked like that as being members of that team.
Well, and they also force you to spend some money to get some more value off them. So I definitely felt the hiring part.
You know, that's interesting. I honestly didn't think about that. I think originally these characters all had higher cost, and they automatically did their ability when they entered play. And then it was sort of this idea of like, wouldn't it be more exciting if they were all just zero cost? So that the turn that you rescued them, you could just play them right down, whether you had anything left or not. Because I think someone like I have some really savvy testers, like I mentioned, like a Jeremy Swerin. Like, if Jeremy's willing to help you test something, like, he's going to offer you some good insight. And this is definitely the kind of thing that he picks up on a lot, which is stuff you might not think about at first, right? Like, let's say I play my turn and I rescue this guy. Well, a lot of times it's going to take all the resources in your hand to rescue, to defeat that side scheme and rescue that character. So it's fairly likely that if you draw this card to your hand, that's the only card in your hand. So if it costs even one resource, you can't play it, which means the turn that you rescue it, if you can't play it, might almost be like an NPE, because now you're drawing one less card when you refill your hand. So I'm pretty sure that's why we dropped all their costs down to zero, was to make sure you never felt like you got stuck with this card in your hand. So if you look at their stats, like, every single one of these characters is someone you'd be happy to pay a couple resources for. So being able to put them down for free, even if you don't trigger their ability, you're still getting like a 4-cost ally for 0 resources.
Yeah, I definitely made a few phone calls during my campaign play while playing leadership to just bring them, bring them back from the discard.
Oh, sure. Yeah, make the call, 0, come right back. Of course. Absolutely.
Uh, I guess the last thing I wanted to ask about Taskmaster was so often we've seen that between stage 1, 2, and 3, sometimes the villain evolves in their ability, but with Taskmaster, like you get an encounter card which kind of reflects that he's still hunting for you, I guess. But his ability didn't actually
Mhm.
change, and I wondered if was that something to consider with balance or difficulty. Was it a bit too hard to like for players to if it let's say it discarded 2 cards? Like was that a bit too troublesome for some players?
Actually, in this case, I think there was a time at which he had sort of an evolving ability, but the thing is, players would forget because they just get used to whatever version they start with. So you know whether it's standard or expert, there are 1 or 2, and they just something in the brain just doesn't click with the next one because they start to read the ability and they go, okay, yeah, I know what it does. So it's some of these abilities when they trigger every turn like that, it's almost like we're training the player. Okay, this is what Taskmaster does, and once it's kind of instilled, it's really easy to just overlook that subtle difference in like discard 2 now or whatever. So when you do this kind of design, you almost just have to keep it the same because to make any change is just going to result in a whole lot of misplays and a lot of people forgetting. And definitely one of the things that we want to do with Marvel is to keep the bandwidth real low, to try not to use up too much of our players' mental bandwidth or memory. Just want people to be able to focus on playing the game and enjoying it rather than trying to keep track of all these different effects.
Yeah, I must admit, even with the ability as is, I sometimes forgot it. I was like, oh, yeah, I could remember to trigger that. So it's probably a good
Yeah,
thing in the long run.
sure, sure.
I noticed with Dr. Zola that I think the main scheme was kind of sounds like it was inspired by the Wells book, The Island of Dr. Moreau. Is that at all an
Dr. Moreau,
inspiration?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
for how the
Now, I
story
have to
went.
confess, I'm not super familiar with that story, um, but it was definitely like I know enough about it to be like, oh, it's a mad scientist on his own island doing horrific experiments. Like, yeah, that sounds like Zola, So we'll just, and it was also I don't know how many people, really caught this, but it was like, we're trying to imagine what does America look like under Hydra rule. What if if Red Skull has assumed authority and Zola's kind of working for him, like Zola being who he is, Red Skull's going to have to give him something to keep him appeased. And so I just kind of imagine he's like, oh, you can have Ellis Island, you can set up shop there and do whatever you want. And so, I just kind of like that. I really let my imagination kind of run away, and you have limited space to tell that story, so I don't know how much of it comes across, but I just thought it was really evocative the idea that he's transformed Ellis Island into this like horrible place, and he's conducting experiments there, and it's just kind of awful all around.
I think it really does come through though, because both there's the lighthouse and the comic to set it up. But I thought Zola was, I think a lot of the art seemed to tell the story too. Like there was just a lot, like that succeeded at that. I think in this scenario.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have. There's a comic, a Captain America comic that I read. Like a two-parter where it's Escape to Dimension Z or something like that, where he gets trapped in this dimension that Zola just kind of rules, and he's turning the inhabitants onto these twisted mutates is what they're called, and so that was a lot of the inspiration here was to see like it's actually really horrifying when you think about it. Like when you just look at the cartoon pictures and it looks pretty silly, but like that ultimate bioservant like used to be somebody. That's kind of the horrifying part of that story that Captain America is fighting against. Is he's trying to save people from this terrible fate, and so I kind of wanted to bring that over to the box and explore that idea.
Yeah. Do you want to, I guess, maybe just elaborate a little bit on what it's like to design a bit more of a minion heavy scenario? Because I feel like a lot of people engaged quite positively with this particular scenario for maybe one of those reasons.
Yeah, I was really glad to see actually how many people were saying that they really like Solo because I don't know why exactly at this point. My memory's not that great, but I remember just kind of being concerned that maybe he was a little too straightforward. Not like I always liked the design, but I never like my playtesters. I don't remember anyone going, "Wow, this one's amazing. It's my favorite." I remember people being really excited for Red Skull and people being very excited for Absorbing Man and talking about the hooks in each of those that they really enjoyed. The most outstanding piece of feedback I remember about Zola was at one point it was too hard simply from the number of minions that keep getting thrown at you, and that the game could kind of drag on as a result. Because if you're constantly spending all of your attacks to defeat minions, then you're never really making any progress against the villain. So, we're trying to find that balance of making sure that, he's throwing lots of minions at you and that's fun, but you also don't feel like you're stuck just spinning your wheels in the mud and not getting anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess the other added element of this scenario is that you introduce the Hydra Lighthouse, and sort of like you lose your signature ally for a little bit. Oh, the prison, sorry, not the light. I think it's the lighthouse becomes.
Yeah, in a campaign mode. Yeah, in campaign mode, that was something we're trying to explore this idea of, like, again, kind of going back to that Captain America book. Like, one of his friends, comes to the Dimension Z to help rescue him and ends up getting captured, and now it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to rescue this person too, or they're going to end up one of these mutates, So that was kind of on my mind of, like, that'd be a fun moment. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's actually in the scenario. It's not part of a campaign set. It's that in campaign mode they stay gone, and that's one of those things we look for too. Like I said, when we develop campaign mode, we look at, here's what all the scenarios are. Here's kind of what they focus on. What's there that we can expand upon in campaign mode. And so the Hydra prison was kind of a no-brainer of, like, oh yeah, look, he captures your signature ally. So if you don't rescue them, that's it. They're gone.
Yeah, the lost forever sort of thing is unfortunate. I did have this weird thing happen where I lost Mockingbird from Hawkeye, and then I kind of rejoiced a little bit that I could add in maybe the other copy of Mockingbird, but I wasn't sure if I could do that. So I think I went with a different card. But,
yeah, I can't remember if we said by title or what.
Yeah,
I'd have to look at the rules.
Yeah, I'm not too sure either, but
I'm sure that question came up. I'm sure it did, and I don't remember. That's the thing with my memory, is like the last time I actually looked through all of these cards and played it was maybe almost a year ago now. I don't know. It's been quite a while. But I'm grateful to Hall of Heroes here for posting them up so I can look at them.
It's funny because I'm on there too, looking at them.
Yeah, there you go.
The other thing I thought about Zola was that it really reinvigorated my enjoyment of Thor, because I really felt like for one of the few times that in a minion heavy scenario you could really showcase what he could do. And I just wondered.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a good choice for this one.
Yeah, I just wondered. I know you've mentioned it before. You talked about how when you were designing like Thor and Doctor Strange and stuff, that a lot of people seem to say that one's better than the other, but in testing and sort of like your approach, that they've kind of felt relatively equal. And I wondered whether you thought maybe that the scenario breadth kind of does contribute to helping showcase what each hero can do. Because for me personally, I found that Thor, I just really enjoyed what he was doing in this scenario. And I guess I'd rather be playing Thor here than Doctor Strange personally, because it really bought into what his mechanics are doing. And I just wondered if you had any further thoughts on like the balance.
Yeah, it was always in the back of my mind when Thor was released and there was the conversation about his power level. It was in the back of my mind that for the most time that I saw Thor being developed and tested, I think he was mostly being used against these scenarios, against the Rise of Red Skull scenarios. So it kind of made sense that, like, oh, I guess haven't really played a lot of Thor against the core set, but I've played a lot of Thor in Rise of Red Skull, and apart from the Absorbing Man scenario, I mean, all of these scenarios are just rich with minions. So Thor is a happy camper in all of these, except maybe Absorbing Man.
Yeah, I kind of skipped over Absorbing Man, but I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts about how that absorbing mechanics had worked together, and sort of like what that scenario was doing differently to the standard sort of or showdown that we'd seen previously from those sort of villains.
I love this scenario. So this is the one that Boggs did for the box, and like I mentioned a minute ago, it got so much positive feedback from our testers. People were really just thrilled with because it was so unique, with these environment cards, and he's gaining the different traits, and his ability changes depending on what trait he has. I love it. I was really excited to play it. I love the delay counters, and they definitely shine more in campaign, but I love how he baked it in, that you have these effects that just get worse if there's 5 or more delay counters, on the main scheme. My favorite moment from the scenario is when super absorbing power gets put into play, and then everything's just awful, right? You draw the omnimorph duplication, and you have to resolve every ability on the card, and it's just super punishing. And I guess that's the Lord of the Rings player in me that just kind of laughs, masochistically as I get wailed on by Absorbing Man.
I found actually that my experience with the scenario it was I much more enjoyed it when I actually just left that side scheme in play and played through the scenario when I was playing two-handed, and I found like it really popped off when he actually had all the traits. And interestingly, in two-handed, it's actually a lot harder to clear the 6 threat than the 3 threat in solo, which I found really interesting. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed what the different mechanics were doing there.
That's that's a really good point. I think that's a lesson that we learned in this box that we address in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Just the difference, like you said, the difference between 3 and 6, between 1 player and 2 player. It's such a huge difference, and yeah, I don't know what we've already spoiled for Guardians of the Galaxy, so maybe I won't talk about specifically what we've done, but we've definitely, we continue to learn with every set that we do, and we look for ways to kind of, continue to balance things out so that, like you said, like it's almost at 3 threat, it's almost too easy in solo to get rid of that side scheme, but at 6 for 2 player kind of feels right, and so we're looking. That was something I think Boggs identified, was like, we need another kind of lever that we can adjust to tweak these numbers to be exactly what we want them to be, instead of just going up by a set amount with each player. And so, yeah, I don't know if we've spoiled that yet or not, but we'll find out more about that later, I guess.
So more to come in the months ahead. Yeah, I definitely. It's nice to hear, because I really love the mechanic, and like you said, like it's a lot of fun seeing those traits pop off. And in higher than 1 player, I felt that. It's just in solo, if you like it with Hawkeye, if you drew the cable arrow, I think it is, it's like you could clear it, and then like he's got the 1 trait. That's cool. But it was better when if I didn't draw the cable arrow, I was like, man, this guy's giving me a hard time. So it's good fun.
Yeah.
I guess the one other thing I was going to comment about Absorbing Man was the idea of the single environment, and I wondered, was there at any point where there was the ability to have like more than 1 environment in play, or did it not really make thematic sense that he was in 2 different locations at once?
I'm pretty sure that we discussed. I'm confident at some point we discussed, him having multiple, traits at the same time. The reason we didn't want to do that, for sure, I don't remember all the conversation, but for sure I know just that guiding philosophy, like I mentioned earlier, is we just don't want to tax the player's bandwidth. We don't want to throw so many effects out there that people have to keep track of. That's a conversation I feel like we've had a lot. I don't think we're having that conversation so much anymore, because we're all pretty much on the same page now. But when we first started working on this game, we're all of us new to working on this game, and so we're having a lot of conversations about design principles and really trying to stick to the vision. So certain things that I would have done in Lord of the Rings, I just won't do in this game, because Lord of the Rings was had a slightly different target audience, where we assumed just a little more bandwidth. and here we're really trying to just keep it down, keep it down and dirty, right? Um, so yeah, I wouldn't want two of these in play because I wouldn't want to have to remember all the different forced responses. I would just like to know that there's one, and that makes it much easier to manage.
Yeah, and I guess the side scheme kind of solves a little bit of that load because you can spot one environment, spot one side scheme,
Hmm.
and kind of follow. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that
remember
makes
when
sense.
when Boggs added that side scheme to the set. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was a really cool, really creative idea, and I don't remember if it always if it always came out with Absorbing Man 2, or if he decided to add that later because of just the really positive response he got to that side scheme. I think everybody kind of felt like you did. Like when that side scheme comes out, it really punches up the scenario. So it may well be that Absorbing Man 2 was revised to bring that out into play to make sure that you always got to see it at least once in the game.
Yeah, yep, yeah. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's one of those really strong transition points for making the scenario
Hmm.
quite memorable.
Yeah, and so Absorbing Man would be an example of a hero where it makes sense, or sorry, a villain where it makes sense to have those kind of differing effects, right? Because his main ability, just gaining the trait of each environment in play, that doesn't take a lot to keep track of, right? So once you know that part, it's not too much to ask you to learn another part. Uh, so that would make him, just like a kind of different from, like Taskmaster.
Yeah, yeah. I know you've probably been waiting to talk about the big villain from the box because you seem very passionate about Captain America taking down Red Skull all the time. I was just wondering, did you want to touch a little bit about your approach to maybe a final scenario of a box, and in particular how Red Skull kind of came about with the side scheme deck?
Well, yeah, kind of like we were talking about how the first scenario in the box, they kind of this philosophy that it should never be the hardest one, and it shouldn't be overly complicated. There's almost a feeling about the last scenario in the box too that it should almost typically feel like maybe the hardest one in the box, or maybe it's okay to be a little more complicated. Kind of the idea of you've been working your way to this point. This is the final showdown. Um, so that was definitely in my mind of like, Red Skull needs to feel like the final showdown. He needs to stand out of the crowd, and so that, yeah, that's not something I necessarily knew exactly how I was going to do at the start, and I tend to design in order, right? Like I tend to start with scenario number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so sometimes you get to that last one and you're like, wow, Zola's really tough. How are we gonna make Red Skull stand out, without just making him busted. Um, but like I said, it wasn't too hard to come up with a focus for him because he is such a schemer. It just I got excited right away to say, oh, let's just have a whole set aside side scheme deck. So he's always scheming. He's always putting side schemes into play. And if players want a real challenge, then they can include more. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. I was about to misquote. I was going to say players can include more modular sets with more side schemes, but the rules put it right into the side scheme deck, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but
Uh,
you did provide the replayability because whichever modular sets you add, any side schemes in those sets get added to the side scheme deck. So there is a way.
yeah, I was just thinking. I think there was a time where like you could have other side schemes in the deck and come out, and we like changed that right away because it was so busted. Because when you're always revealing one, and then another one comes up, or heaven forbid, like two more come off the deck, and now you have like all these side schemes in play. It becomes very difficult to manage that. So yeah, for a second there, I almost forgot that we fixed that. It's a good thing we did.
Yeah,
But yeah, I like the replayability idea of whatever modular sets you put in, you'll get different side schemes.
yeah, and you also introduce like some of them seem to give small benefits to the first player, then other ones, a bit detrimental. Was that an important part of the balance to the scenario?
I think it really came more from one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I was getting, and honestly continue to get, is people like getting rewards on occasion, right? Having that sense of accomplishment of, oh, I defeated this side scheme and now I get a little benefit. Now I get to draw a card. Now I get to ready my character. Now I get to heal. Basically it's nice every now and then to be rewarded for your good deeds instead of, often you'll get punished, like when this is defeated, reveal a card, and that's almost kind of a bummer. Sometimes you're like, man, I worked so hard to defeat that, and all I got was a lousy T-shirt, or like another encounter card. So yeah, definitely a piece of feedback I got was, hey, how about when I defeat this one, you give me something nice? So it was a little bit of the balance too. I think it's more for solo players than anyone else. This is the kind of scenario that's going to be a little more challenging in solo, just because you're essentially getting twice the number of reveals every turn at that single player count, right? You're getting a side scheme plus whatever comes off the encounter deck that turn.
Yeah, it was certainly harder as a standalone than a campaign game as well. Like the difficulty jumped up drastically, I found, which was a good thing. It made me want to come back to it.
Good.
You had that really interesting treachery, the bit of rivalry that exhausted a character for each side scheme, which I thought was fun.
Yeah, there's kind of a fun note about that one. You can see the kind of the crackling energy around his arms on that art, and that was like every now and then we get a little bit of feedback from Marvel, and I remember they were concerned when they saw the original sketch there was no crackling energy, and they're like, how can Red Skull beat Captain America? Like, Red Skull can't beat Captain America. He always wins, And we had to explain, like, well, he's using the power of the Infinity Stone. Like, that's giving him the upper hand. And they're like, okay, well, could we get some kind of crackling energy or something to show that he has the power of the Infinity Stone? And I was like, yeah, we could do that for sure. That was kind of neat. It's nice to know they're looking that closely and thinking about it that much.
Yeah, the infinite power art as well. Like I quite like the seeing Red Skull punch Hulk. Quite a nice
I love the
look
on Hulk's face. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think my favorite part of this one is the sleeper. I love the sleeper awaken. Just the 1-2 combo of you reveal this side scheme and then this big minion comes out, because that was another comic book I was reading at the time. Was this Captain America book where he's helping to solve some problem in England. He's in London, and this Red Skull enacts his master plan, and this giant robot like comes up out of the river, and I was like, wow, what a cool visual! Like, I want to do that. I want to do that in our game, and the artist just nailed it. Like, on both the sleeper and the sleeper awakens. Like, on the sleeper, you see him standing in front of the Washington Monument. You can see fighter jets behind it. Just creates that perspective of this towering, robot, and but the image of him coming up out of the water on the side scheme. That's just one of the coolest. Like, sometimes you just write these art briefs, and the art comes back just so spot on that it just makes you happy.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those really memorable parts of the scenario, and because it's random, it can, the sleeper pops up at some random time during the scenario, which is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to create that sense of dread, right? That sense of like, oh, he's coming out at some point. Like, boy, I hope he doesn't come out turn one. Like, every time you're revealing a side scheme, you should be thinking like, oh, geez, I hope it's not the sleeper, right? Like, just don't be the sleeper awakened yet.
I guess the other thing is interesting is, obviously with Ronin, we saw a bit of the health per player on the minions, and now the sleeper has it as well. How do you see that sort of shift slightly with some of the minions in terms of their health pools?
Yeah, I feel like anytime you have a minion with health per player, you can sort of think of that minion like a mini boss, right? Like, I think everyone has played enough video games by now. They understand the idea of the mini boss. You fight somewhere halfway through the level. The level's not done yet, but you got this really memorable. You've been squashing all these other little minions, but now you got a real fight on your hands. But it's not the big boss yet. So I think minions with the per player hit points is kind of to capture that idea of like, we want everybody to join in the fun of trying to take this guy down.
Yeah, and take some damage in the process. Yeah, I think he's a lot of fun as a minion. I guess. Good. Yeah, so I guess those are all the scenarios, and I think it's a fantastic product. In that sense. How did you find the hero side? Were they things that came a bit later? Like, was Hawkeye and Spider-Woman sort of some ideas that you had during core design that you were like, we want to get these in now, or how did they come about a little bit?
They were part of the vision. They were included at the beginning with the scenarios. Like I think there was some discussion, early on because this was our first ever story box or sorry campaign expansion. Um, there was some discussion about what goes into a campaign expansion, but once we knew like what everybody wanted to see was a couple heroes and some scenarios, then we write the vision. And Hawkeye and Spider Woman were always the two heroes that we chose for this box. Thankfully everybody from top to bottom agreed that they were good choices. Um, to me, Hawkeye is really one of the core Avengers. There's a lot of people who have been Avengers. Even like Beast from the X-Men has been an Avenger, but you don't necessarily think of Beast as an Avenger. You tend to think of more of like an X-Man or. But when you think about the core Avengers, even before the movies that came out, he's just been a constant member of the team. And so for sure, I just kind of looked at our first wave of heroes, and I thought we got a lot of the really important Avenger characters, but we were missing Hawkeye. And when you think about the kind of people you'd like to see Hawkeye fight, with his bow and arrow, like Hydra minions just kind of jump to the top of the list. Like I think one of my favorite cards is his electric arrow, where he's shocking a Hydra goon and he's got the flavor text, like "Hail Hawkeye!" Like that's so perfect for me with who Hawkeye is. And so definitely wanted him. And then also I really like the character of Spider Woman from the books. I think I got into the Avengers with Brian Michael Bendis run on the New Avengers, and she features very prominently in there. And part of what makes her interesting is that there's always this question of her loyalty when you find out, oh, she's a double agent working for Hydra, but then you find out no, she's a triple agent working for Shield to spy on Hydra while she's on the Avengers. There's this really intimate connection she has to Hydra, so that just kind of made her an obvious choice for a Hydra themed box and an Avengers themed box. She really bridges those two.
Yeah, and I guess with the choice of Spider Woman, you've introduced sort of a unique way to deck build. Was that something that was quite important for you guys to get into the game sort of early on, or is that something that came up a bit later in development?
No, that's actually something that Nate French he felt very strongly about, that he wanted to get a hero into the game early in the game's life that broke the deck building rules. He wanted us to kind of show to the community right away, like this is something that we want to explore. Is the idea of we've told you how to build decks. Now here's a character that breaks those rules and lets you build decks differently. And it was really just a question of who's the right hero for that. And I think I've talked about this elsewhere, where it was like we definitely explored that idea with Bruce Banner and Hulk. There was some talk about would that be the right place to do it, but ultimately we wanted the Hulk that we made. That was the one we wanted to make. So then it was like, okay, who else has sort of this dichotomous character that would really make sense to have more than one aspect? And it was like, well, a double agent would have two aspects. That sounds right. So yeah, I felt like everything really came together with having her in the box and having her ability as it is. I'm really happy with the reception she's gotten, because she really is a cool hero.
Yeah, she immediately just opened up all this creativity for one player to bring to the table, and also you've introduced a bunch of ally debates that that didn't exist before this pack, where I've got my copy of an aggression ally, and then the aggression player's got their copy of the same ally. We have to fight over the uniques, but it's a good problem to have.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to just gather your thoughts a little bit on just a few cards quickly. I wonder what you thought of with the design around Goliath. Is like a different sort of giant ally that was added to leadership, and he kind of feels like he's built around this sort of reset sort of style deck that has kind of evolved since the box has come out. How did you find developing sort of the allies for the Hawkeye deck?
Well, the kind of the focus of the leadership cards for Hawkeyes that kind of changed over time. I think originally I was trying to give leadership the pieces to build kind of more of a Voltron style ally deck where you'd play down an ally and then build them up with upgrades and then, just try to keep them around for a while. Whereas I think what we have prior to this box was sort of like, if you're playing leadership, just throw down an ally, use it up, chump block with it, play another one. They're just kind of easy come, easy go. And I thought it'd be fun to try to do something a little different. And you can kind of see how there's hints of that still in the cards that got made. There's the Sky Cycle, which I just love the art on that. I just love Hawkeye zipping around on a Sky Cycle. That also came out of a comic I was reading where I was like, this is awesome, like 80s Avengers, where they're like, what's better than a motorcycle? A flying motorcycle. That's what the Avengers ride. And team training is also there to, give each ally you control another hit point so that, they have a little more staying power. So there was kind of this Voltron focus, but ultimately I think I just didn't really have the card space that I wanted. I ended up kind of shifting just a little bit to do a little bit more just like Avenger focused stuff with like Earth's Mightiest Heroes, exhaust one to ready another, which definitely combos with Goliath on the turn that you go big with him. And so does the Sky Cycle. That was another favorite moment for me, with the picture of a giant Goliath like riding a tiny Sky Cycle and using it to get ready.
I like the idea that he's flying as well because he has the aerial trait.
Right. Yeah. I just kind of picture like when you see an adult trying to ride their kid's tricycle or something. I just kind of picture Goliath like that on a Sky Cycle.
Yeah. You mentioned Earth Mightiest Heroes, and I was wondering how do you feel about sort of introducing that sort of card into the basic card pool rather than like a particular aspect?
Yeah, that's kind of an ongoing conversation, between the development team about like what kind of cards should be basic. I think the consensus we kind of reached early on is that basic is where you're going to kind of find a smattering of everything, but largely it's gonna feel like a more expensive option than if you were finding a similar effect in the right aspect. So like, you've got like first aid that can heal out of basic, and healing feels like it's more like a protection thing, but like protection is going to have better healing options. Or like gaining a tough status card. Invulnerability, I think, is like a 3-cost basic event. It felt like everybody should have access to the tough status card, but there's going to be better options in other aspects. And then there's another class of basic cards which are actually like really good and cost effective, like Avengers Tower. But the reason that they're in basic is because, we don't want to say that playing the Avengers means playing aggression. Like, we're not going to make Avengers Tower necessarily like a leadership card, because we want you to be able to play Avengers Injustice or Protection to assemble your team out of that aspect. And so there's almost, like 2 tiers of basic cards. So if a basic card calls out like a specific trait like Avenger or something like that, if it has some kind of play restriction, then it's probably going to be a little bit punchier than just a basic card that you can just splash with everybody. So Earth's Mightiest Heroes was really there to say, this is an Avengers focused box with Hawkeye and Spider-Woman, and it comes after, sort of an Avengers focused cycle. So we're trying to throw in, these cards to get you really excited to build an Avengers deck, to give you more tools for that deck. If you've already bought the Captain America pack and you're already running Avengers Assemble, now here's another option, that you can choose to throw in there if you want to.
Yeah, it's been interesting to play. I think you've mentioned before about you've heard of the card game Legend of Runeterra, and like their approach to aspect building is that you just combine 2 aspects together, and there is no like neutral card pool. So it's interesting to hear your thoughts about like the role of what a basic card pool can offer, and sort of like those 2 tiers that you mentioned. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could have made Marvel Champions, just the 4 aspects, but we don't have like Legends of Runeterra. You can always choose 2, whereas in Marvel, only Spider-Woman can choose two, right? So I think for a game like Marvel Champions, you want that basic pool so that when you're building your hero deck, you've got your heroes kit already, and then you choose your aspect, and then whatever else you want to round out your deck with, you have that basic pool to dip into. So in our mind, this much the team is very much in agreement on that. Those are like three separate tiers where like your player cards are always the best. That's the intention. Now, individually, you could make arguments that, well, this aspect card is actually more effective than this hero card. But basically, overall, those hero cards are going to be your really punchy, really cost-effective cards. Next come the aspect cards, and then come the basic cards, kind of in general. That's the overall kind of view. Within that, there's always exceptions.
Yeah, and I guess with the aspects, do you have sort of like a goal or direction as to where you sort of want to take each one? You mentioned how like leadership, you thought about maybe addressing some of the chump blocking and going, a bit more Voltron style. Did you have other considerations for the other three aspects as well?
Yeah, definitely. With every set that we're working on, we're trying to expand the card pool, not just to keep repeating things we've already done and just making it, a different cost. We're always looking for some kind of guiding principle that is like, well, here's a batch of protection cards that's about defending this way or doing something entirely different. So that hopefully, the more that the pool expands, the more avenues to play the game will open up within each aspect. So I think leadership's the most obvious example that I can think of right now, like just because we're already talking about it, the idea that you could play a leadership deck that's all about just cycling through allies, or you could play a leadership deck that's about putting them down and building them up and keeping them in play for as long as possible. And to me, that's kind of exciting that you have two very distinct approaches to how you want to use those allies. Arguably, you could make a leadership deck that's not about allies. I don't know what that looks like yet, but maybe that's something someone's out there doing already. I don't know.
I've tried a few morale boost decks. It's fun, but you end up just building the signature. Like you play the hero cards, and then I don't feel as morale boosted as I probably should. So,
Sure.
I'm just waiting for a few more cards, I think, and I'm looking forward to that sort of commander. Yeah, there's a commander sub theme that I feel you guys definitely have there in the wings.
Yeah, that's true. That was something we discussed with leadership as well. It was sort of like, okay, what are they besides allies? And it was definitely kind of like, well, they're leadership. They said they lead by example. They boost up the other players, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to do that for all the aspects, to build them up, and hopefully, the more content that comes out, the more obvious that will be to players, and hopefully they get excited about it too.
Yeah, well, there's been just so much to sort of wrap up in this box and talk about. Thank you for your time sharing all that.
Hmm.
I wondered if you had just a little bit of time to talk a bit more broadly about Marvel.
Sure.
I'm
What would
not
you like
sure.
to know?
Yeah, are you giving me the keys to the city? Is that what's going on? Some people talk about sort of like first principles for card games. And I just wondered if you had thoughts on what you would consider the first principles of what Marvel Champions is as a card game.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that in the past before, to try to make it really clear, who our target audience is, as far as like, we're not trying to design the most complicated, in-depth, beard strokey kind of card game. Instead, we're really trying to keep it fast-paced and fun and action-packed and lighthearted, right? Like those are definitely our guiding principles as laid out in the vision for the game. And I think we've touched on that throughout the conversations we've had about the scenario designs. Why we're not trying to pile too many lasting effects into to the villain's play area, because we're not trying to take over your bandwidth and that. And it really is different from like anything else that we do in the card game department, or at least anything we've done so far. Especially when compared to the other two co-op LCGs, like both Lord of the Rings and Arkham are much more slower paced than Marvel. I don't think they're necessarily slower paced games, but slower than Marvel. There's definitely more effects to keep track of and more consequences to consider. And the whole feel of them is different, right? Like those are really both Arkham and Lord of the Rings are IPs and games where the heroes are constantly going, how are we ever going to get through this? Whereas Marvel is really meant to be like, hey, watch me do this. It's a very different approach. Uh, so I would say those are the guiding principles for Marvel.
Talked a little bit, I heard, about sort of that print and play modular set and the positive reception to that. And I just wondered how you as a team feel about modular sets at the moment and sort of what the promise of those are moving forward.
Yeah, I'm thrilled by the reception to modular sets in general. The reception that the Ronin set got, I think, kind of blew us all away. That was um, kind of a last minute thing that we were asked to do. Once Gen Con, announced that they wouldn't be, hosting the convention this year, then it was like, okay, well, we still want to do something. What can we do in the time that we have? And the idea of just like a free print and play modular set came up. Something that would sort of tease the Guardians of the Galaxy box. And so I think just because of how it came up and how quickly the turnaround was, I don't think that Boggs or I really had a lot of time to consider what the reception was going to be like. It was sort of like, well, let's just make the coolest thing we can think of and hand it over to the marketing team to do what they need to do with it, and we'll get back to work on our regularly scheduled product. So when it got announced and it got a lot of traction online. I think we saw this is one of those rare cases where I got to see some numbers, afterwards, and it was like thousands of impressions on Twitter, like in response to this, and compared to all the other things that we announced and shared over the course of that week with all the different games and things that FFG announced, it was like one of the top hits, for our most views and most comments was this Ronin set, like. So we're like, wow, okay, this resonated with people, and so that definitely got our attention and got us excited for lots of reasons, right? Just that Marvel Champions is getting this much attention, that people are that excited for it, that within that modular sets are something that people really like, that this print and play option is something people are interested in. There's just a whole lot there, and so. I think it opens the doors to other possibilities, and I'm excited to explore those. And I probably can't say anything more about it, really. But I'm glad that people are responding so well to the modular sets, because that's something that Nate really championed through the early design, and something that Boggs and I have really been working since to continue to do more with. I know that Boggs was really conscious of it as he was developing the Guardians box, that he was like, people really like these modular sets. I want to make sure that this Guardians box has a lot of modular sets in it, and I think it was something he was encouraging me to kind of go back and look at the Red Skull box and see if we couldn't carve out a couple more, which is maybe where that typo came from on the Crossbones set, right? Where Hydra Patrol was probably one set at one point, and then it was like, hang on, there's room here to make two more distinct sets. So yeah, I'm really happy with where modular sets are, and I'm really excited for what we're gonna do with them in the future.
It sounds like if I want to get big on Twitter, I need to work on a modular set.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that's fantastic news to hear about the response to it all, and you guys are doing such a great job. So I'm really hoping that as we close up this year and head into 2021, that the momentum keeps going, because I think, like you said, this card game's not really like anything else either FFG or other companies are making, and I think it's one of those ones that I want to be playing for years to come. So yeah, thanks for all your effort and the team, and it's been great to talk to you. I guess before we wrap up, did you have anything you lastly wanted to say to the community at large? Or
I feel like we gotta get some. I'm encouraging people from the Marvel team outside of the card studio, the card game department to come on. I was on a show where they were asking about the art, and I was like, I should really reach out to the art directors and ask them about the art, or my producer, Molly Glover. She does so much for this line. She's really one of the unsung heroes on this line, that really keeps things moving and keeps them on time. And so yeah, I want to encourage you or anyone who's doing podcast interviews, should really reach out to some of these people. They got some amazing insight to offer for the process. I know a lot of the questions that I get from podcast to podcast are related to the process, like we'll talk about the vision document and stuff like that. And people seem to be interested, so I think that's one of the big things I learned about working on Marvel. With Lord of the Rings, I was a little bit more of a one-man show. I definitely worked with the art team and the graphic design team. I didn't do it all by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a different beast, right? Like Lord of the Rings print runs were not Marvel print runs. The numbers were just different, and Marvel has a bit more aggressive release schedule. I simply couldn't manage this line, the way I managed Lord of the Rings line. It's very much a team effort. So yeah, I'd just like to give credit to all my teammates on that team, and encourage anyone who wants to. I just definitely reach out to them sometime, because I personally I would love to hear what they have to say. You could ask them horror stories about working with Caleb. That'd be entertaining. Like what's it like working with this guy who can't remember what he wrote on his own cards?
Michael,
on second thought, don't have him on your show. Don't ask.
Michael shared a story of how Molly was testing the Ant-Man cards. So okay. I would love to hear firsthand of what it was like to try and tear one of those fold cards.
Sure,
and
yeah.
not succeed. So that might be something we look to into the future.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, absolutely. That was all. I just want to take a moment to brag on the whole team, for just doing such a great job. It's definitely not something that Boggs or I could just do on our own.
Yeah, no, I think it comes through as a team effort, and so I really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. And I definitely would be keen to have anyone from the team on. So I'll get onto that very soon. But Caleb, thank you for your time, and thanks for sharing your insights. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. I feel the same. It's great to be here.